The rock was unremarkable. Granite, river smoothed, about the size of a softball. It sat in an evidence bag on Detective Nora Briggs's desk, tagged and photographed, its surface mapped with yellow markers, indicating 8 distinct points of interest. 7 were trace amounts of tissue and bone fragments. The 8th was a smear of blood that didn't belong to the victim. It belonged to her husband. For 22 months, Blake Reeves had played the role flawlessly. The devastated spouse who'd lost his wife on a beautiful October afternoon. The man who'd called 911 in tears, who'd stayed at the search site for 72 hours without sleep, who'd collapsed at her memorial service, unable to finish his eulogy, the widower who'd fooled her family, her friends, the media, and initially, even law enforcement. But lies, no matter how carefully constructed, leave traces in deleted search histories, in gambling debts, hidden in spreadsheets, in the geology of a mountain trail, where a woman was reported missing 3 miles from where she actually died. The Rock told a different story than Blake Reeves did. And unlike Blake, The Rock couldn't lie. October 14, 2018. White Mountains, New Hampshire. The 911 call came in at 6:47 p.m., just as the sun began its descent behind Cathedral Ridge. My wife, the man's voice cracked, desperate and raw. She fell. I can't find her. God, I've been searching. Please, you have to help me. The dispatcher's voice cut through his panic with practiced calm. Sir, I need you to take a breath. Tell me your location. Eagle's Ledge Trail. We were hiking. She went ahead to the overlook. I told her to wait, but his breathing came in ragged gasps. She's been gone for 2 hours. I've looked everywhere. There's a drop-off that's 400 feet down. What's your wife's name? Autumn? Autumn Reeves. She's 31, brown hair, wearing a blue jacket. His voice dissolved into something between a sob and a shout. Please, she could be hurt. It's getting dark. Blake Reeves sounded like a man watching his world collapse in real time. Because that's exactly what he wanted them to hear. Within 40 minutes, the New Hampshire Fish and Game Search and Rescue Team mobilized. By 8:00 p.m., 53 volunteers combed the Eagle's Ledge Trail system with high-powered flashlights, calling Autumn's name into the gathering darkness. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras circled overhead, scanning the dense forest canopy for heat signatures. Rescue dogs strained against their leads, noses to the ground, following scent trails that seemed to vanish at the overlook's edge. Blake stayed at the command post, wrapped in a foil emergency blanket despite the mild evening temperature. His jeans were torn at both knees, mud streaked his North Face jacket, scratches marked his forearms. Defensive wounds from branches, he'd explained, from pushing through undergrowth while screaming his wife's name. When the local news crew arrived at 9:30 p.m., their camera found Blake with his head in his hands, shoulders shaking. The footage would air on every major network by morning. The anguished husband, the mysterious disappearance, the treacherous mountain that had swallowed a young woman without a trace. Autumn is everything to me, Blake told the reporter, his voice hoarse from hours of shouting. He held up his phone, showing their wedding photo, both of them beaming on a beach in Mexico. Autumn's head on his shoulder, his arm protectively around her waist. We've been together since college. She's an elementary school teacher. Everyone loves her. She's careful on trails. She grew up hiking. His voice broke again. He couldn't continue. The reporter placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. We're going to find her, she said softly. Blake nodded, wiping his eyes. I can't lose her. I just can't. By dawn on October 15th, the search had expanded to 200 acres. Dive teams prepared to enter the Eagle River Gorge below the overlook. Though the recent rains had turned the water swift and murky, cadaver dogs joined the search, their handlers warning the family to prepare for difficult news. Autumn's parents, Paul and Marianne Hartwick arrived from Boston at 6 a.m. Paul, a retired postal worker with steel gray hair and a face carved by grief, went straight to Blake and pulled him into a fierce embrace. "We'll find her," Paul whispered. "We'll bring our girl home." Blake's face crumpled against the older man's shoulder. "I'm so sorry. I should have stayed with her. I should have—" "Stop." Paul gripped Blake's shoulders, looking him in the eye. "This is not your fault. Accidents happen. You hear me? This is not on you." Blake nodded, unable to speak. Autumn's sister, Jenna, arrived 20 minutes later. At 36, she was 5 years older than Autumn, a pediatric nurse with their mother's auburn hair and their father's pragmatic temperament. She'd driven through the night from Hartford, her eyes red-rimmed but her jaw set with determination. She found Blake sitting on the tailgate of a fishing game truck, staring at nothing. "Blake." She sat beside him, took his hand. "Tell me exactly what happened." He recounted the story he'd already told police twice. They'd left home at 10:00 a.m. for a day hike, one of their Sunday rituals. Eagle's Ledge was a moderate trail, 4 miles round trip, with a spectacular view from the summit overlook. They'd hiked it before, just last month. Around 4:00 p.m., they'd reached the overlook junction. Autumn had wanted to go see the view. Blake's knee was bothering him, an old soccer injury, so he told her he'd wait at the junction. She texted him a photo at 4:15. "View is incredible." That was the last he'd heard from her. By 5:30, he'd grown worried. He'd hiked to the overlook. Her phone was there on a rock, but no Autumn. He'd searched the area, calling for her, looked over the edge, saw nothing but rocks and rushing water 400 feet below. That's when panic set in. He'd searched for another hour before calling 911. Jenna listened, nodding, squeezing his hand. "You did everything right," she said firmly. "You called for help. You searched. This isn't on you." Blake's eyes filled again. "What if she fell? What if she's down there and we can't?" "Don't." Jenna's voice was steel. "We don't think like that yet. She could be injured somewhere. Disoriented. People survive. We're going to find her." Blake nodded, grateful, leaning into the comfort she offered. Neither of them noticed the way his left hand, hidden in his pocket, was perfectly still. No tremor, no nervous energy. Just a man in complete control, playing the part he'd rehearsed for months. 72 hours later, no trace of Autumn Reeves had been found. Not a shoe, not a piece of torn fabric, not a single drop of blood on the rocks below Eagle's Ledge. It was as if she'd simply stepped off the mountain and into thin air. The search scaled back to a recovery operation. Blake refused to leave. He slept in his car in the trailhead parking lot, his phone constantly refreshing news updates and social media posts. Volunteers brought him coffee and sandwiches, which he barely touched. His devotion became legendary. The local paper ran a front-page photo. Blake silhouetted against the sunrise, standing alone at the overlook where his wife was last seen, titled "The Vigil." "That man loves her," the fire chief told reporters. "You can see it. This is destroying him." Everyone saw it. Her parents saw it. Her sister saw it. The community saw it. Even Detective Nora Briggs, assigned to investigate the disappearance by New Hampshire State Police, saw a man consumed by genuine anguish. What none of them saw, what Blake had been extraordinarily careful to hide, was the $89,000 in gambling debts. The secret credit cards, the Google searches from 3 months earlier. How long until missing person declared dead, life insurance accidental death payout, and most damning, hiking deaths. New Hampshire statistics. They didn't see the 3 times he'd visited this exact trail alone in August and September, his phone's GPS logging each reconnaissance trip. They didn't see the deleted text messages to a burner phone number, discussing his mounting desperation as Autumn had started asking questions about their finances. They didn't see that the rock in his hand, the one he'd used to strike Autumn from behind on a different trail entirely. 3 miles from Eagle's Ledge, had cut his palm when his grip slipped during the blow. The bandage he wore on his right hand during those 72 hours of searching, he told everyone he'd cut it on branches. No one questioned it. Why would they? Blake Reeves was the perfect husband, devastated by a tragic accident on a beautiful October day. And for 22 months, everyone believed him. December 2018, 3 months after the memorial service filled St. Catherine's Church, beyond capacity. 300 people squeezed into pews meant for 200, with overflow crowding the vestibule and spilling onto the front steps. Autumn's third-grade students sat in the front rows, clutching handmade cards and wilting dandelions. Her teaching colleagues wore blue, Autumn's favorite color. The principal had declared it Autumn Reeves Day at Riverside Elementary, retiring her classroom number in her honor. Blake sat between Paul and Mary Ann, his black suit hanging loose on a frame that had shed 15 pounds. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His hands trembled as he gripped the printed program. Autumn's smiling face beneath the headline, celebrating a life of light. When his turn came to speak, Blake walked to the pulpit with visible effort. He unfolded a piece of paper, stared at it for a long moment, then looked up at the sea of faces. Autumn made every day brighter. His voice cracked on her name. She'd wake up singing. Did you know that? Terrible singing. Completely off key. A ripple of tearful laughter moved through the church, but she didn't care. She'd sing making coffee, sing in the shower, sing driving to work. She found joy in everything. He paused, swallowed hard. I don't know how to exist in a world without her music. His knees buckled. Father Owen Braddock moved quickly from his seat, catching Blake's elbow, steadying him. Blake shook his head, tried to continue, but no words came, just a raw, animal sound of grief that made Mary Ann Hartwick sob into her hands. I'm sorry, Blake whispered into the microphone. I can't. Jenna rose from her seat and climbed the steps to the pulpit. She wrapped her arms around Blake, and he collapsed against her shoulder, his body heaving with sobs that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. The congregation wept with him, even Detective Nora Briggs, standing in the back beside the holy water font, felt her throat tighten. After the service, the community had raised $12,000 for Blake's grief counseling and recovery. The check was presented by the mayor in the church hall, surrounded by tables of casseroles and cookies that Blake wouldn't eat. Thank you, he told them, his voice barely audible. Autumn would be so moved by this. She loved this community. January 2019. Blake returned to work at Keystone Pharmaceuticals, his sales territory covering Vermont and New Hampshire. His colleagues had sent flowers, cards, a fruit basket he'd never opened. His boss, Gordon Chen, told him to take all the time he needed. Grief doesn't have a timeline, Gordon said, gripping Blake's shoulder. Blake nodded gratefully. Work helps. Sitting at home with her things, I can't do it yet. By March, the house went on the market. A modest colonial on Maple Street, where they'd lived for 4 years, where Autumn had planted tulip bulbs every October and hung bird feeders that Blake dutifully refilled. The realtor suggested a price point, but Blake countered lower. I need to move quickly, he explained. Too many memories. I can't sleep in that bedroom anymore. The house sold in 6 days, $15,000 below market value. Blake signed the papers without reading them carefully, his hands still trembling or appearing to tremble. The performance had become second nature. In June, he relocated to Burlington, Vermont. A fresh start, he told everyone. The mountains here didn't remind him of Eagle's Ledge. He could breathe again, maybe begin healing. His social media told the story of a man honoring his late wife's memory. Photos of hiking trails with captions like "Autumn loved mornings like this." Sunset shots over Lake Champlain, "Thinking of you today," like every day. A donation receipt to the Appalachian Trail Conservancy in memory of Autumn Reeves, who found God in the wilderness. The posts garnered hundreds of supportive comments. "You're so strong, Blake. Autumn is watching over you. What a beautiful love story." But Detective Briggs, scrolling through Blake's Instagram late one night in her home office, noticed something peculiar. Blake never tagged Autumn's memorial page, never tagged her friends. And slowly, methodically, he'd unfollowed every single person from their New Hampshire life. By September, his feed showed a different man, smiling at brewery tours, kayaking with new friends. His captions shortened, less mournful. The performance was fading, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like relief. Briggs made a note in her personal file, not the official case file, which had been marked inactive in December. Just her own observations, the instinct that had made her a good detective for 17 years. Something was wrong with Blake Reeves' grief. It was too perfect at first. The collapse at the pulpit, the vigil at the trailhead, the tearful thank you, and now it was fading too quickly. Real grief didn't follow a script. It came in waves, unpredictable and messy. Blake's grief had been a flawless performance that ended precisely when the audience stopped watching. In her kitchen, Briggs poured a second glass of wine and opened the case file she wasn't supposed to still have on her laptop. She reread Blake's timeline from October 14th, reviewed the list of evidence collected. Autumn's phone, found on the Overlook Rock. Her backpack, never found. Water bottle, never found. Car keys, in Blake's pocket. She always forgot them, so I kept them. She pulled up the life insurance policy Blake had filed to collect $750,000. The policy had been taken out 18 months before Autumn's death, long enough to avoid immediate suspicion, but recent enough to be convenient. Who plans for accidental death? Briggs closed her laptop. She had no evidence of foul play, no body, no witnesses, no probable cause to request warrants or subpoenas. The case was cold, and her superiors had made it clear tragic accidents happen. Stop looking for conspiracies and grief. But Nora Briggs had learned to trust her instincts long ago. They'd saved her life once during a domestic violence call, gone wrong. They were screaming at her now. Blake Reeves was lying. She just had to prove it. August 2019. 10 months after Whitney Moss had stopped sleeping through the night, she'd lie awake in her cabin on the edge of White Mountain National Forest, staring at the ceiling beams, replaying October 14th in her mind like a corrupted video file that wouldn't stop looping. Autumn had been her best friend since college. They'd met in an outdoor education course, bonded over a shared love of trail running and terrible horror movies. When Autumn married Blake, Whitney had been her maid of honor. She'd given a toast about how Blake finally convinced Autumn that not all adventures required hiking boots. Now she couldn't stop thinking about the things that didn't add up. Whitney was a professional wilderness guide, certified in search and rescue. She knew Eagle's Ledge Trail like her own driveway. She'd hiked it with Autumn at least 20 times over the years. Autumn was cautious to the point of paranoia. She always carried 2 emergency beacons, always texted coordinates when she reached summits, always stayed on marked trails. October 14th. Autumn had done none of those things. No coordinate text, no emergency beacon activation. And according to Blake, she'd gone to the Overlook alone despite knowing he was waiting at the junction. That wasn't Autumn. She didn't separate from hiking partners. It was her cardinal rule. Whitney had compiled a list in a spiral notebook, the pages now dog-eared from constant reviewing. In her kitchen, Briggs poured a second glass of wine and opened the case file she wasn't supposed to still have on her laptop. She reread Blake's timeline from October 14th, reviewed the list of evidence collected. Autumn's phone, found on the Overlook Rock. Her backpack, never found. Water bottle, never found. Car keys, in Blake's pocket. She always forgot them, so I kept them. She pulled up the life insurance policy Blake had filed to collect $750,000. The policy had been taken out 18 months before Autumn's death, long enough to avoid immediate suspicion, but recent enough to be convenient. Who plans for accidental death? Briggs closed her laptop. She had no evidence of foul play. No body, no witnesses, no probable cause to request warrants or subpoenas. The case was cold, and her superiors had made it clear tragic accidents happen. Stop looking for conspiracies and grief. But Nora Briggs had learned to trust her instincts long ago. They'd saved her life once during a domestic violence call, gone wrong. They were screaming at her now. Blake Reeves was lying. She just had to prove it. Whitney had brought her concerns to Detective Briggs in late July. She'd spread her notebook across the detective's desk, her voice urgent, hands gesturing. Something's wrong. Autumn wouldn't have gone to that overlook alone. She wouldn't have left her phone on a rock, and Blake. Whitney paused, searching for the right words. His grief is too perfect. Real grief is messy. This is performed. Briggs had listened, nodding slowly. I hear you. I have questions too, but without evidence. Then look for evidence. Whitney's voice rose. Search their house, check their finances. Interview him again. He's lying. I know he is. Based on what? A feeling? Briggs leaned back in her chair, her tone gentle but firm. I've investigated this thoroughly. No signs of marital problems. No affairs. No financial motive. Blake's cooperated completely. He even volunteered for a polygraph, which he passed. Briggs tapped her pen against her desk. Look, Whitney, between us, my gut agrees with you. But I can't get warrants based on gut feelings. I need probable cause. I need evidence. Right now, I have a missing woman, a grieving husband, and a tragic accident. Whitney had left the police station shaking with frustration. She'd started posting on true crime forums, laying out her theory in detailed Reddit threads. The response had been immediate and brutal. Let the man grieve in peace. You sound jealous of their relationship. Conspiracy theorist much? When she'd appeared on a local true crime podcast in August, the backlash intensified. Autumn's parents released a public statement asking Whitney to stop spreading hurtful speculation during our darkest time. Jenna had called her directly. Whitney, please. Jenna's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Blake is suffering. We're all suffering. What you're doing, it's cruel. It's not helping anyone find Autumn. Jenna, just listen. No. I've known Blake for 7 years. He loved my sister more than anything. You're so focused on conspiracy theories that you're not seeing the truth. Autumn had an accident, a horrible, tragic accident. And Blake has to live with that for the rest of his life. The call had ended with Jenna's ultimatum. Stop or lose the entire Hartwick family's friendship. Whitney had kept going. By late August, Blake had blocked her on all social media platforms. So had Jenna, Mary Ann, and most of Autumn's extended family. The true crime community had turned on her, labeling her an obsessed conspiracy theorist harassing a grieving widower. But Whitney knew Autumn, and she knew something was catastrophically wrong with Blake's story. She just couldn't prove it. September 2019, the insurance payout. The $750,000 life insurance policy paid out without contest. The insurance company had investigated standard procedure for large death claims and found no red flags. Policy was 18 months old. Premiums had been paid on time. No history of fraud. Accidental death in wilderness areas, while tragic, wasn't uncommon. Blake received the check on September 18th. He deposited it quietly, told no one except the accountant helping him sort through Autumn's estate. The public perception remained firmly in his corner. At least Blake is financially stable during this nightmare. Small mercy after losing everything. Detective Briggs, however, had requested the insurance file. She sat in her home office at 11 p.m., reading through the paperwork with a growing sense of unease. Policy taken out, April 2017. Autumn's disappearance, October 2018. Time gap, 18 months. Perfect. Too perfect. Long enough to avoid immediate suspicion as a murder for insurance scheme, but recent enough to suggest what? Planning. Briggs highlighted the date in yellow. Then she opened her personal investigation folder, the one she'd been building off the books, and added a new note. Check financial history. Why did Blake suddenly want life insurance in April 2017? What changed? She had no authority to subpoena bank records. The case was closed. Her captain would shut down any request to reopen without new evidence. But Nora Briggs had been a detective long enough to know when the perfect husband with the perfect alibi collects $750,000, someone needs to follow the money. She just needed to figure out how to do it without a badge and a warrant. March 2020, 17 months after the call came into Vermont State Police at 2:47 p.m. On a Tuesday, the dispatcher logged it as a potential fraud tip and forwarded it to the Criminal Investigation Division. Detective Nora Briggs picked up on the third ring. "This is Detective Briggs," the woman's voice was young, shaking. "I don't know if this matters, but I've been dating someone and I just found out he lied about everything." Briggs sat up straighter, pen poised. "Go on." "His name is Blake Reeves. I met him in January. On a dating app. We've been seeing each other for 2 months. He told me he was divorced. No kids. Clean slate. But my friend, she listens to true crime podcasts. She recognized him from a case about a missing wife." The pen clattered onto Briggs's desk. "Say that again." "Blake Reeves. He's not divorced. His wife died or disappeared. I don't even know what's true anymore." The woman's voice cracked. "He talks about marriage, moving in together. He's been so sweet and normal. How could he lie like that?" Briggs was already pulling up Blake's file on her computer. "What's your name, ma'am?" "Sutton. Sutton Ridge. I live in Burlington. Sutton, I need you to tell me everything." Within 48 hours, Briggs had compiled a timeline that made her blood run cold. January 2020, Blake created profiles on 3 dating apps: Hinge, Bumble, Match. February 2020, first date with Sutton Ridge. March 2020, discussing moving in together, meeting families. 15 months after Autumn's disappearance, a man supposedly devastated by the loss of his soulmate had moved on with remarkable speed and shocking deception. Briggs picked up the phone and dialed a number she'd saved months ago. FBI agent Garrett Tan, Financial Crimes Division.
Tanayan. Yes, Nora Briggs, New Hampshire State Police. Remember that case I mentioned last year? Missing woman, suspicious husband, closed file? The one you couldn't let go of? That's the one. I think I finally have probable cause. Guy's got a secret girlfriend, lied about his dead wife, and collected $750,000 in insurance money. Can you help me follow the money? Send me everything you have. Agent Tan worked fast, with proper authorization from federal prosecutors. Insurance fraud crossed state lines. He subpoenaed Blake and Autumn's financial records going back 3 years. What he found was damning. September 2017, Blake opened 4 secret credit cards in his name only. September 2017, August 2018. Accumulated $89,000 in debt. Transaction history. Online gambling sites. Poker tournaments, sports betting. Autumn's knowledge. Zero evidence she knew. October 2017, Blake took out $750,000 life insurance policy on Autumn. Timeline, 1 month after gambling debts peaked. October 10, 2018. 4 days before Autumn disappeared. Blake transferred $1,000 from joint account to personal account.
Emptying their savings, Tan called Briggs at 6 a.m. You were right. This was premeditated murder for money. How fast can you get a warrant? Blake's Burlington apartment was a study in detachment. Minimal furniture. Generic art on walls. No photographs of Autumn anywhere. Not on the fridge. Not on the nightstand. Not in any drawer. In the bedroom closet, Briggs found what she was looking for. A locked safe. Bolt cutters made quick work of it. Inside, $104,000 cash. Insurance money. Never deposited. Blake's old laptop, the one he'd reported stolen during his move. 3 dating app profiles printed and stored. A photograph of Autumn, face down in the safe's bottom. Briggs lifted the photo carefully, on the back. In Blake's handwriting, "I'm sorry. It was the only way." Not a confession, but close enough. FBI cyber specialist Dr. Amani Cole recovered Blake's deleted search history from the laptop he'd tried to hide. July 2018. How long until missing person declared legally dead? Life insurance payout, accidental death versus natural death. Hiking deaths, statistics. New Hampshire. August 20. Eagles Ledge trail map. How to fake grief. Polygraph beating techniques. September 2018. Best time to hike without witnesses. Body decomposition timeline in water. The metadata didn't lie. Blake had researched Autumn's murder for 3 months before executing it. Blake was at work, sitting in a conference room presenting quarterly sales figures, when Vermont State Police and FBI agents walked through Keystone Pharmaceuticals' glass doors. He saw them coming. For just a moment, his mask slipped. A flash of panic across his features before the performance snapped back into place. "This is insane," he said calmly, as they cuffed him. "I loved my wife." "Then why did you Google hiking deaths 3 months before she died?" Briggs asked quietly. Blake said nothing. As they led him to the car, his coworkers watched from windows, phones recording, jaws slack with disbelief. The man who'd cried at a memorial service, the man who'd fooled a family, the man who'd almost fooled law enforcement. His performance was finally over. If this story of deception, persistence, and justice resonated with you, don't let the truth stop here. Subscribe to stay updated on more untold true crime cases where the truth hides behind perfect lies. Comment below. Have you ever suspected someone wasn't who they seemed? What made you question their story? Like this video. If you believe Detective Briggs's instinct to never give up, save this case. Share this story, because sometimes the most dangerous predators wear the most convincing masks, and awareness can save lives. Remember, Blake Reeves fooled everyone because his lies mixed truth with performance. The lesson isn't paranoia, it's this. Real grief is messy. Real love doesn't need a script. And the truth, no matter how buried, eventually surfaces. Next story drops tomorrow. Until then, trust your instincts. Question the perfect stories. And never stop seeking the truth. If Autumn Reeves deserved justice, Detective Briggs made sure she got it. In 2021, Blake Reeves was sentenced to life without parole. Whitney Moss, the friend who never stopped asking questions, now runs a foundation, helping families navigate suspicious disappearance cases. And Jenna Hartwick speaks publicly about the guilt of defending a killer and the importance of listening when something feels wrong. The truth survived, so does Autumn's memory.